Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all over the world. I would like to welcome all of you from the series of webinar, Chat and Talk. It's my pleasure today to present Professor Belaspadi with the title of the presentation about outcome-based assessment of a student learning and performance. We'd like to have introduction about Imam Abdurrahman bin Faisal University. There is a 3-minute clip video. We'd like to introduce it first. Please go ahead.
تمر جامعة الإمام عبد الرحمن بن فيصل بمرحلة ارتفعت فيها التوقعات، حيث يسهم التعليم في تقدم الأمم، ولذا تنطلق جامعتنا من رؤيتها الاستراتيجية جامعة رائدة تسعى إلى التميز محلياً وإقليمياً وعالمياً، وتهدف إلى تحقيق رسالتها على الوجه الأكمل في تقديم خدمات معرفية وبحثية ومهنية إبداعية بشراكة مجتمعية فاعلة، ومن خلال قيمها الأصيلة وعلى مدى تاريخنا العريق منذ أن تأسست عام 1975 ميلادي فرعاً من جامعة الملك فيصل بمدينة الدمام، مرورا بصدور القرار السامي لتحويلها إلى جامعة مستقلة عام 2009 تحت اسم جامعة الدمام، ثم انفصال جامعة حفر الباطن من رحم جامعة الدمام في عام 2014، وأخيراً بتشريفها بمسمى جامعة الإمام عبد الرحمن بن فيصل في عام 2016. كما تميزت الجامعة بالحصول على العديد من الاعتمادات المحلية والعالمية على مدى السنوات الماضية، ونحن فخورون بهذا الإنجاز والذي بني على خطط استراتيجية تجسد اختيارنا لنموذج الجامعة الشاملة أداة لتحقيق رسالتنا في خدمة الوطن عموماً والمنطقة الشرقية على وجه الخصوص. وينتشر منسوبون في 6 مواقع في المنطقة الشرقية، ويبلغ عدد موظفينا نحو 8000 موظف ما بين أعضاء هيئة التدريس والكادر الإداري والطبي. كما يدرس في الجامعة ما مجموعه 35,000 من الطلبة ينتشرون في 19 كلية و85 برنامجا ضمن 4 قطاعات طبية وهندسية وإدارية علمية وإنسانية ومصنفة كالتالي: المسار الصحي، كلية الطب، كلية طب الأسنان، كلية الصيدلة الإكلينيكية، كلية العلوم الطبية التطبيقية بالدمام، كلية التمريض، كلية الصحة العامة، كلية العلوم الطبية التطبيقية بالجبيل. المسار الهندسي، كلية الهندسة، كلية العمارة والتخطيط، كلية التصاميم. المسار العلمي، كلية علوم الحاسب وتقنية المعلومات، كلية إدارة الأعمال، كلية العلوم، كلية العلوم والدراسات الإنسانية بالجبيل. المسار الإنساني، كلية الآداب، كلية التربية، كلية العلوم والدراسات الإنسانية بالجبيل. كليات لا تتبع السنة التحضيرية، كلية الدراسات التطبيقية وخدمة المجتمع، كلية الشريعة والقانون، وكلية المجتمع.
Yeah, thank you so much. Here we are. Just a brief, it was a brief introduction about Imam Abdurrahman bin Faisal, where we call it IU. As a matter of fact, this program webinar series under the title and the brand, we call it Chat and Talk. It's under JSUR initiative. JSUR means communicating with the world, which is our goal in it to accelerate the process of improving IU ranking and initiative. And this was established less than a year, and it was really a good connection between us and the world. We have more than speakers, more than webinar going on. This webinar is to improve our ranking and academic. This will be at the communication. Also, this is a monthly Zoom webinar, and we're glad to have a lot of people that are now registering through our website, the university website. The reason for it, for enhancing the quality improvement, accreditation, ranking issues concerning teaching and learning and outcomes. And today, this is one of our lectures we have. And today, our speaker, he's going to speak about the outcome-based education. Professor Billis Badi, he's the father of outcome-based education. I just will have some brief information and some introduction about outcome-based education. What I think it's going to be introduction to what's the title, what he's going to work on. Outcome-based is the paradigm shift resulting from the failure of traditional education. It is a methodology of curriculum design and teaching, usually focus on a student actually do after they are taught. It focuses on what should the student learn, what is the motivation for the student to learn it, how can the academic institution and its resources help the student learn it, and how will it be determined what the student have learned, which is we call the assessment. Next. The outcome-based is the culminating part of outcome-based education. Can I have next slide, please? No, the previous one. The previous one. Thank you. Thank you. The outcome-based assessment is the culminating part of outcome-based education. It is the deliberate collection of evidences of student learning, which is based on outcome. Very helpful for analyzing how the course contributes to student success. It is assessment tools, including summative assessment, formative assessment, continuous assessment, performance-based assessment, and authentic assessment, and which we call it rubrics, etc. Next, rubrics is an authentic assessment tool, particularly useful in assessing criteria which are complex and subjective. The OPE is directly connected to three commitments, which is first one, to ensure the assessment of learning are transparent, applied consistently, and congruent with learning outcome LOS. A designed tool to both assess and enable student learning. We learn about evidences and effective pedagogies. Next. The outcome-based assessment advantages, we used to go with individual learning, shows the steps for improvement, clarifies the learning outcome, promotes student growth, Marks become more transparent. Student take ownership for learning. End of reliance in the average. My introduction here about OPE of a student learning and performance, the outcome-based, the assessment process must be aligned with learning outcome. It should be support the learners in their progress, formative assessment, and validate the achievement of intended learning outcome at the end of the process, which call it summative assessment. It should be adapted. That will depend on kind of outcome that is focused to appraise. To aid program and identify the areas of growth and improvement based on the assessment result, to inform also the policymaker to contribute the impact of the program in student growth and development, to demonstrate what the program is accomplishing and what it is performing to continuously improve student learning. Within the advantage, support decision-making activities, curriculum, program views, strategic planning, and external criticism, etc. Next, academic performance is the extent to which a student has attained their educational goal. Student learning outcome will always describe measurable knowledge, skills, and behavior that the student should be able to demonstrate as a result of completing the program. Actual student performance is indicated by their average earned grades in the direct assessment, which is linked to the course learning outcome. It was used as a direct evidence of a student learning. Summative assessment, we call it always, we are using as tests, quizzes, and other grade course activities that are used to measure the student performance. They are cumulative and often reveal what a student have learned at the end of the unit or at the end of the course. Within the course, summative assessment include system for calculating individual student grade. For formative assessment, which means student receive input and guiding feedback on their relative performance to help them to improve. Face-to-face in office hour and written comments and assignment. Formative assessment can be used to measure student learning on a daily ongoing basis. These assessments reveal how and what a student are learning. Today, our speaker, our panelist is Professor William Spady, and he will tackle the topic within 4 major pillars in his topic. The first one, which is clarifying what it outcome-based is and is not, expanding education condition of success, and number 3, defining performance outcome of significance, and number 4, you cannot assess what you haven't defined. Professor William Spady has devoted his 50 years career in education to transforming the disempowering structure and the practices of modern education systems across the world. Acclaimed for his international paradigm shifting work on outcome-based education. William Spady, or we like to use the name Bill as is a friend. Bill uses the concept of heart power and life performance learning to expand conventional thinking and practices regarding human potential, learner empowerment, leadership development, models of education, authentic assessment, strategic visioning, and paradigm change. William Spady, he is a former Harvard University professor. The 2 latest, his 11 books, bringing heart and soul to the education. One of the amazing book in 2014, and the other one, which is I would like everybody can attain it, is outcome-based education empowering a sense 2020. It is available in a multiple format on Amazon, and his website is there. By all means, we are thrilled and on behalf of Imam Abdurrahman University, Professor William Sbadi, the floor is yours and you are more than welcome. Thank you. Okay, you can share your contact, Professor.
Hello, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, good.
But there is no share content yet.
Okay, it's on my screen fully. I'm very sorry.
Do you like to share from our part?
Yes, I can. Let's see. It says share screen. I'm sorry. I may have done this. Excuse me.
Yep.
There we go. Can you see it now?
Yes, you can move the slides down.
Yeah. Here we go.
Yep.
Very
It's
sorry.
here. Yep. Yep.
All right, colleagues, thank you very much. I don't know if you can see my face or me, but I had surgery the other day on my nose, and I have a big bandage on my nose. So this is not normal, and I will be healing over the next month or so, and the bandage will be removed. I'd like to talk about outcome-based education because it is a different kind of approach to education, the modern education that we have. Okay. In this slide, I'm saying it is a combination of things. It's a philosophy, it is a model, it's a systemic strategy, it's a paradigm. And all of those are committed to maximizing the success of learners, both in school and beyond. That is, in their education and especially beyond it. It is not ABA, which stands for accountability-based assessments. It is not CBO. There's a whole syndrome of CBOs, like calendar-based opportunities that I will mention. It is not outcomes accreditation. It is not standardized testing. It is an approach to education that has a singular paradigm, 2 empowering purposes, 3 premises that underlie its philosophy, 4 principles, all of which are there to transform and expand this key concept, expanding the conditions of success. What are the conditions? What are the ground rules? What are the circumstances that make it possible for students to be successful? These 4 factors, the paradigm, purposes, premises, and principles, combine to truly transform those conditions of success, and I will be spelling that out for you before we get to the assessment part of this. Unfortunately, the accountability-based assessments, the CBO syndrome, etc., they have none of those critical elements. And what they actually do is erode the conditions of success. There may not be time for me to get into that extensively with you, but I've spent 50 years trying to magnify, amplify, expand, transform those conditions of success. And there are lots of practices that we do in education, well-meaning, that don't do that. I put my ideas together in the year 2000 in a book called Beyond Counterfeit Reforms. And it was basically to amplify and show and describe how these various obstacles that we have, especially testing programs, as they have been used for accountability purposes, how they really undermine these conditions of success. My colleagues and I in the Philippines and elsewhere, including one of your Saudi colleagues, created a book in 2018 called Beyond Outcomes Accreditation, precisely to point out these differences. So I want to start with this very, very fundamental and critical definition. This came to us in 1986, and it has driven the work and the advancement and the evolution of outcome-based education ever since. The definition simply is two words, the two words you see in red. Outcomes are culminating demonstrations. They aren't cumulative, they're culminating. They're the things that happen at the end, and they are demonstrations. They are things that you can see the students do. They are defined by words, not numbers. Okay? It is not about scoring. It is about defining what you want the learning and the performance to be. And they take forms that elevate education beyond its one-dimensional focus now. And that one-dimensional focus is academic, it is cognitive, it's what happens in your head, okay? That's not bad, it's not enough. Okay, the basic lesson here is that performance learning and performance assessment are three-dimensional. And I'll get to that in the presentation. Excuse me. There's a concept that I created a word. I call it educentrism. Okay, educentrism is how, quote, modern education has operated, where everything is in fact defined around time. Okay, how long, how often, when things are supposed to happen, the clock, the schedule, and the calendar. And if you look at this slide, almost everything that matters, and there are many more things I didn't put into this slide, but educentrism applies to programs and courses, contact and credit hours, learning opportunities, assessments and grading, learner progress and promotion, record keeping and credit, and the list goes on and on. So everything that is vital and central to our instructional mission in education is in fact time-based, which is why this is a Spadeism, as people call it. Courses aren't bodies of knowledge, they're 9-month events. Okay, we compromise the knowledge to fit into the time. That's critical to this whole concept. Somehow, courses miraculously end at the same time, even though we may not have achieved everything in those courses we wanted to. The CBO syndrome, I would like you to pay particular attention to this, because so many things that people say they're doing in the name of outcome-based education, all right, is basically convenience-based operations. And those convenience-based operations involve the calendar-based opportunities that students have, curriculum-based outcomes. That is, we write outcomes about our curriculum rather than define curriculum for our outcomes. Content-bound objectives, which are simply smaller versions of outcomes. A cellular-based organization, which has things broken into many, many different categories: classrooms, lecture halls, programs, courses, etc. And mainly here as a focus for us today, credit-based obsession. No one wants to do anything unless they get credit for it. And that's what we want to shift and change. There are many examples of outcome-based practices outside of education itself. And here are 8 of the ones that I am listing, including parenting. I would like you to pay particular attention, okay, to karate instruction, for example, okay? Merit badges in the Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Girl Scouts that we have in the States at least, flight schools and qualifications, okay? All of these examples have one fundamental thing in common, okay? They are all focused on functional competence, okay? Can people do essential life processes skillfully, reliably, and adeptly? Okay, those 3 criterion words: skillfully, reliably, adeptly. Adept means with versatility, flexibility, being able to adapt to the situation. That is OBE's criterion defined standard: functional competence, which is why they don't give C+ karate belts. They have different belts for different kinds of skills, but you must master that skill to get a belt. There's no C+. There's no mediocre low grade. And I like to remind people, pilots have to land safely every time. 80% won't do it, okay? We would have millions of people dying every year if the pilots were at a less than 100% standard of being able to do their functional competence. These models share 4 things, and I would like to use these as a template, not only for what exists outside of education, but how we might apply that inside of our practice. Each has a clear criterion defined. That means real words defining what it is, the standard achievement level, okay? Criterion defined. Each level is explicitly taught. Those standards have been sent and set by verified, validated, credentialed, etc., by experts in the field, the people who know what functional competence really means. And here is the key: multiple performance trials are allowed so that you get competent. Practice, 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 because it is the culminating demonstration of that skill that's really critical. I've put a lot of that, an enormous amount of that work in my 50-year history with this concept into this latest book. We'll be talking about this more later, but outcome-based education's essence really is to empower students, to make them effective, powerful, self-directed learners who will continue to learn throughout their lives. Now, how does OBE expand the conditions of success? The first breakout insight that came in the quote modern era came from a man named John Carroll, who was a professor at Harvard at the time. And he wrote a paper in which he said, we have the wrong notion, the wrong concept of what aptitude is. And education is built around that false notion. Aptitude is the rate of learning of students, how fast or slowly they may learn. It's not their ability to learn. All students can learn a whole variety of basic functional competencies, but they don't do it on the same day. They don't do it on the same way. But if education is time-based, it makes everybody do it on the same day, okay? Which creates failure for slower learners. It isn't that they can't do it, said John Carroll. It is that they don't do it on the calendar days we've designated for it to be done. Benjamin Bloom, the very, very famous educator in the Western world, okay, picked up John Carroll's idea. His was the second basic, his work was the real launching pad. This instructional model he called mastery learning. It challenged education's fixed time opportunity conditions, okay? Its operations and its structures. It was a focus on improving classroom instruction. I will share that in a minute. It worked within the existing curriculum. It was not a fully outcome-based model where curriculum was based on the outcomes. In this case, Bloom said we need to change conditions of success using the curriculum we have. It was a success for all learners philosophy. It was inclusionary. We want every learner to be a successful learner, said Bloom, and I'll get into more of that in just a second. It challenged education selection bias. Okay, our grading systems, our assessment systems, et cetera, is to find out who's the smartest. That may be appropriate, but that does not create a literate, well-functioning, harmonious society. So Bloom was interested in all of those aspects in implementing his model, but the fundamental paradigm shift, and I know there are lots of words here, okay? So let's focus on the top set, on time. Bloom wanted to move, okay, the time and opportunity structure from being a fixed time, single opportunity definer of opportunity, time, to being a flexible time, multiple opportunity resource for learning. And he spent a great deal of time developing his model around how to use that resource in more valuable ways. And I was the beneficiary of learning that from a number of the practitioners who were using Bloom's work. His second big paradigm shift had to do with learning standards. From being vague, we're not quite sure what they are, and highly variable, and comp means comparative and competitive, which a lot of the schools in the United States were at the time, to a clear, known, and criterion-defined standard. That shift was key to the first major principle of outcome-based education. The time shift was the key definer of the second principle, which we will be looking at. So those two paradigm shifts are dramatically different from standard operating procedure and practice in schools. Mastery learning, ML, paved the way for outcome-based education with having criterion-defined standards, no bell curve, clear and high expectations, which got set at 80%, which was a whole level higher than the expectations of grading systems in the United States, which were typically 70. Okay? It was a model that focused on establishing and teaching the prerequisite skills students needed in order to be successful at what they were doing. Okay? It used aligned formative assessments. I'm going to make a big point of that here in a second. Targeted assistance. That is, if you didn't do well or as well as you wanted to do on your formative assessments, your diagnostic assessments, there was to be targeted assistance using a different kind of instructional approach to assist the student. In other words, expanded opportunity, giving them at least minimally a second chance, was a key aspect of his instructional model. And the results of this, the combination of these factors, was tremendous. They were getting, in a whole variety of research studies that were done, they were getting dramatic improvements in student learning given this set of factors. Bloom's view of formative assessment is, yes, they are diagnostic tools that is, any test can be a diagnostic tool for identifying the learning strengths and weaknesses of the student at the time they take the test, at the time the assessment happens. And I prefer to use assessment rather than test, which will become very clear, okay? They are to provide concrete feedback to the student. Here's how you're doing in the specifics of what was assessed, not just here's the feedback of a grade. And that would happen regularly, and it would guide expanded opportunities. Any expanded opportunity students were given should be targeted to what do they still need to learn and accomplish, not just simply a second chance without that additional feedback and support. Summative assessment is about grading. Summative assessment is about grading. Formative assessment is about seeing how the students are doing according to Bloom. We basically simplified that, and you'll see that. Formative assessments are done and get graded, if you want to call it that, in pencil, because you can change it and do something. It is that the grading practices that we do are altogether too often done in ink. That is, they're permanent markings, even though it's in the middle of a course. Outcome-based education's paradigm. This is what drives this improving and expanding the conditions of success. It was very simple. What and whether students learn successfully is more important than when they do it, that is, on which date it happens, and how they do the learning. And the how became a major issue around mandated curriculum practices and instructional practices associated with tests. This is not teach to the test. It is absolutely not teach to the test. What and whether is more important than when and how. That is the guiding umbrella of the concept. The purposes. Send all students into the world at graduation, fully equipped and empowered to succeed, which means if they're going to be fully equipped and empowered to succeed once they're gone, we need to develop the outcomes around what will they face and have to do once they're gone, not simply what is the curriculum we have. So first purpose, send fully equipped and empowered students out the door. Second purpose, maximize the conditions of success that enable this to happen. The philosophy can be expressed in these three, what we call premises. You could call them underlying beliefs, okay? Number one, and this came from a combination of John Carroll and Bloom's work, okay? All students can learn and succeed, but not on the same day in the same way. That is, learners themselves have different kinds of what were called learning modalities or learning styles that make it much easier to learn, in some cases, hands-on, in other cases, visually, in other cases, just intellectually absorbing information, absolutely different styles. And it's not all going to happen on the same day because the rates of learning, the aptitudes, aren't the same. So this is a student-oriented, student success-oriented philosophy. Number two, success breeds success. Failure breeds failure. Mediocrity breeds mediocrity. Now, times two means success breeds success. This is in Bloom's language, cognitively, i.e., the more you learn and develop the cognitive skills you need, etc., the more successful you will be in later learning. But success breeds success motivationally. And it's the motivational part of this that really motivated Bloom and that people didn't understand. Students early in their lives, children early in their lives, think of themselves as being successful learners or not successful learners, and they fulfill that prophecy. He said, we want every young learner to emerge with the motivation to succeed as well as the skills to succeed. Third premise, schools control the conditions of success. 4 by 4. That is, OBE has 4 key principles, and there are 4 dimensions to those, which I will lay out here in just a second. The 4 power principles are the action parts of the philosophy. They move it from a philosophy to, in fact, an operational system, okay? They're critical determinants of the conditions of success, and they are there to promote successful learning for every student. Here in a nutshell, and that's all the time I have, okay, are these 4 critical principles. And I've colored them this way, that is 2 in green and 2 in blue, so because they work in pairs. The most important principle, even though they are all important, the most important one is the clarity of focus on outcomes of significance principle. Okay? Design down, the 4th principle, is only possible if you know what the outcome is clearly that you're working toward. So you design down is about designing curriculum and instructional processes, etc., down so that you are building a ladder for the students to move up. Okay? You start at the end and design back in this process. Expanded opportunity and high expectations go together, because if they get out of balance, they're kind of like being on a teeter-totter, okay? If one gets out of balance, if there's more opportunity than expectation, then in fact, you progress very little. And if there's high expectations and with insufficient opportunity, that's the danger of creating unnecessary failure. So here's what these mean in application. It needs to happen consistently. That is, use the principles all the time. It has to be done systematically, especially in relation to the design down and the expanded opportunity parts. It has to be done creatively because there are all kinds of ways for not just taking more time, but using time more effectively, using combinations of learning more effectively, but all four need to operate together, or it's like taking a wheel off the car. Okay, so the 4x4, the four principles: clarity of focus, expanded opportunity, okay, high expectations, and design down, done consistently, systematically, creatively, and simultaneously. Now, there's a lot here. I could spend hours with you pointing out and elaborating on and guiding how to apply this first principle. Clarity of focus means that we start with, okay, we teach with, we instruct from, we design from what is our ultimate culminating outcome, or it could be outcomes, at the end. Now, you could say the end of what? Well, that became a huge issue, which I'll get into in the next segment, okay? But the culminating outcome is your starting point. It is your priority, okay? It is absolutely your priority because that's where you want to get every student to that point. And it's your bottom line. It's the bottom line of, are you effective or not? What you see is what you get really means, are they demonstrating that? Is it visible, etc. Right? Show them no surprises. This is part of the philosophy. Let them see what the successful culminating outcome looks like by you demonstrating it, explaining it, continue reminding them that this is where we're going to end up. This is the route to getting there. One of my colleagues brilliantly said to me, way back in the early days of this work, he was a university professor of some distinction. He said, I think what I should do is give the final exam on the first day. Okay? Because if that's really what my outcome is, then I want the students to know what's in it so that they, in fact, will learn the things that are critical for passing the exam. Wow, that's radical, but boy, that really got my attention when he said that. Now, opportunity ends when two things happen. Time blocks are over, whether we call them semesters, class periods, terms, school years, etc. When the time block ends, opportunity ends, because that's when the students ultimately get graded in ink. And what we were encouraging professors and teachers to do, okay, I mean, forever is this going to be a time-based system, or is this going to be a learning-based system? Is this going to be outcome-based, or is this going to be regulation-based or routine-based? When should the grades turn into ink? And I've had some practitioners say to me, not until graduation. Everything is still open for improvement until graduation time. Pretty radical, but that really embodies what the philosophy is. Now, I learned some wonderful things from the practitioners of OBE. And one of those things was that when you give a grade to a student, they think it means they're done and don't have to do better. Often because the grade means there isn't an opportunity to do better. They learn, well, we're not going to give low grades to students for low performance. We're only going to give high grades. So if you don't have a grade, you don't get credit. So you're going to have to work for a high grade with excellent performance, okay? Because, point 2 here, low performance really is incomplete learning. We want the learning to be complete, and we want the students to know they're capable of it if they put in the time and the effort. So expect excellent work and have students earn an expanded opportunity by initially showing you that they're making a major effort to succeed on any kind of initial assessment that we do. Design down. It is simple and it is complex. It is simple because it's the way mountain climbers work. They start from the peak and they design the climb from the back from there. Okay, because there may be only a given way to take the last 5 steps to get to that peak. You got to know how to get to that point. Then you back and back and back and back down to the bottom of the mountain. There may be many starting points at the bottom of the mountain, but they're not going to get you to the peak unless you know, okay, and design back from there. That's their strategy. They start with clarity of focus. They start with principle number 1. They know what the peak looks like, and that's what they do. Now, let me go into outcomes in more depth here, because that opens the door to our main issue of assessment of outcomes or performance outcomes. As I mentioned earlier, 2 words define outcomes. Okay, if an outcome is a culminating demonstration of learning, it means the culminating is that final result. It's that ultimate target. It does not mean cumulative. And cumulative is what generates averaging. Okay, there's a Spadiism. The more things you average, the less you know about anything. Okay, because everything, all those numbers are all mixed in together, etc., and you don't really know what the student did well or not. This is about final result. Okay, and it's tangible action. It's tangible action. You need to see it happen. It's not just mental processing. Visible actions require competence. That transcends mental processing. This is about what can you do with your mental processing? How can you apply your mental processing in a way that develops genuine skill and competence? That is driven by using action verbs to start or define and shape the outcome itself. Okay? Driven by the action verb. Which verb you choose makes an incredible difference. I'll show you that in a second. Okay? Third, outcomes are defined by words, not numbers. That was the mistake that the Bloom people made way back with mastery learning, is everything got focused on 80% instead of what were the actual things you wanted the students to learn and be able to do. Okay? So outcomes are defined by words, not numbers. They're not defined by percents, and they're not defined by averages. This is enormously controversial needless to say, but it's why OBE, pilot training, karate, scuba diving, all those examples, it's why they work, okay? Because in 2 or 3 of those examples, people's lives are at stake. Now, this is really important. When we started, 99% of everything that people were doing when they, quote, wrote outcomes or wrote objectives started with the verbs know or understand. They wanted students to know this. They wanted students to understand and understand. We said, you can't see anybody know or understand anything until they do something, until they show you they can do it. So that panicked the teachers because everything was know and understand. So we came up with 2 verbs very quickly that would take learning to a whole new level. Okay? Just these 2 simple verbs, describe and explain, because it means the students have to describe it, okay? Not you putting it on a test or saying, oh, which is the best description, and the students have to explain it. Those 2 verbs actively engaged learners. Okay, it wasn't just remembering, it was being able to do something with whatever the knowledge and information was. They deepen learning and its utility, just these 2 verbs, okay? I'm not saying stop there. These were the baby steps. These were the starting points, okay? Because you could go to design, you could go to develop, you could go to assay or analyze, etc. And every time you change the verb, you change the outcome and everything that goes with it. Those 2 verbs alone invited multiple modalities of application. You could speak them or write them or draw them or act them out. In other words, it engaged the student fully in all the different kinds of aspects and talents and dimensions of their self that they could use, okay? So it deepened the learning and its utility. This then led us to developing what we call the law of alignment. And it means all the words are critical. An outcome must state what the words are. What is it that we want the student to be able to show us and do? The curriculum must not only contain, but directly develop and reinforce those words. It doesn't mean only those words, but it absolutely needs to focus on those words. Instructors must teach those words. That is, the instructional process you use must directly address and apply and develop those words. Students must perform. That is what they must do. They must do the outcome. They must perform those words, and the assessments must embody those words. That is enormously challenging and represented a huge shift. And the work that we're doing with universities now is more and more, how do you align? How do you align it? How do you align it? How do you get it to match? Okay, how do you do what the outcome says? So we became future focused just a year after that took place, okay? A year after the definition, culminating demonstration. 3 things emerged. The concept of outcomes of significance, okay? the notion that outcomes of significance matter long after culminating has passed. An outcome of significance is an outcome that sticks. It stays. It is really important. It goes out the door after graduation. It's not just something you learn to pass a test along the way while you're a student. The outcomes of significance dramatically expanded our thinking about, well, so what are outcomes and what kind of forms do demonstrations take? Okay, there were more future breakthroughs for us. Okay, finally, it came to the issue, what will they face once they're out the door? What will they face after they've graduated? And we developed an entire design process we called strategic design that built really life performance outcomes, which you'll see in a second, off of answering that question and defining what we called spheres of living and future conditions. What this did, however, is add a critical dimension to learning and to the instructional process, and that is performance context, the situation in which the performance is going to take place. When we started, everything was focused on discrete skills and structured tasks that happened in classrooms and happened in the course of a course. This was discipline-based, it was subject-based, etc. These were the micro, as it were, forms, we called them traditional forms of doing academic learning. This opened the door, that is higher order competences, and then complex unstructured tasks, that is where the students had to invent it and do it themselves, a major student-directed project, for example. Those kinds of things elevated the whole notion of what is an outcome and what are we looking for and what really matters when they're gone. But things really shifted dramatically. They truly transformed. This is why we call the ones up above complex functional roles and life roles. That's the transformational zone of this hierarchy. So we had a traditional zone, we had a transitional zone, and we had this zone that nobody knew what to do with because everything was curriculum based and it was not based around life roles or complex functional roles at all. But that's what you needed to do once you went out the door. So what we finally formulated was this very simple hierarchy. Outcomes of significance are three-dimensional. They involve cognition, which is one-dimensional. Now, it's a big dimension, but it's what happens in your head, it's mental processing, but it's only one-dimensional. Second dimensional is competence. What can you tangibly do with what's going on in your head? That is, it's applied skills and abilities. But the third dimension is where can you do it? Under what circumstances? Under what conditions? Okay? Under stressful conditions, under whatever they happen to be, what is it that where the doing really counts? So what we came up with is just a much bigger picture of outcomes. What are they and where do they come from? Rather than the curriculum, where do they come from in terms of how we view the human being, how we view life itself, our values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This became incredibly rich and challenging for people because they were so used to staying stuck in the curriculum things they were doing. A big breakthrough came, and I hope that this is going to be compelling and convincing for you. When we developed something called the Life Performance Wheel. The Life Performance Wheel extended from Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive objectives. It involves essential IQ, okay, intellectual, and EQ, emotional intelligence, performance roles for effective functioning in all life roles. That is what I'm about to show you is something that all well-functioning adults do, whether they're parents or they're doctors or lawyers or teachers or governmental officials. I mean, everyone performs these roles. This framework was critiqued by experts for 3 years before I was willing to put it out. Okay. It was validated by corporate leaders as vital to effective career performance, and it redefined what we meant by professional. Now, there are lots of things on this framework, and I'm going to just point out to you that the things at the bottom below the dotted line are the primarily IQ outcomes or performances, and the EQ, that is the social relational abilities and capacities, are the ones above the line. You can't do any of the ones above the line by yourself, okay? They're all interactive, they're all social, and they get fundamentally neglected in most of the education that we do because it focuses mainly on the bottom. The developer of the concept of emotional intelligence, or the person who put it sort of framed it and made it famous, Daniel Goleman, and with his work on emotional intelligence, did all kinds of research and showed that, in fact, emotional intelligence makes much more of a difference on ultimate career success, promotion, advancement, etc., than do the IQ things. They get you into your career, but from there, the ones above really take over and are critical. Are we developing those? In 1991, we made another breakthrough. We went beyond the performance wheel, okay? And that was a framework of outcomes about human beings themselves, okay? And the words in red, learners, workers, thinkers, contributors, producers, were the performance roles that people carry out. And the words in black, self-directed, collaborative, complex, etc., those are the qualitative attributes that shape that. The word who is critical because the word who is how would you know one if you saw one? What does a self-directed learner do, or a collaborative worker, or a community contributor? Well, this required us to define something we call essential performance components, okay? Those are just constructs. Those are the performance roles. This is what it takes in order to make the role happen. You know a self-directed learner because they do this, or they do that, or they do something else. So this is a very exacting design process. And in fact, it is these things that become the major driving forces, these essential performance components. They really determine the curriculum that's required, the instructional processes needed, because we need to teach the learners, our students, how to do the things in those essential performance components. They are the essential elements to use in assessing the outcome. That is, that's what we want the learners to do at assessment time. And they determine the learner's future. Those are the things that they're really going to carry out the door. We put these together in frameworks. I've worked in the Philippines a great deal the last 4 or 5 years. And at St. Paul University, a system of 6 universities in the Philippines, this is how they defined and worked with those 5 kinds of things, etc. All right. This is what they said they wanted their graduates to be and be able to do. These were their culminating outcomes, etc. Excuse me. Their K-12 students, okay, that was, by the way, this was their idea of a professional. You'll see that right in the center. And this is what they wanted their K-12 students to be able to do. Okay? They had 35 schools, K-12 schools across the country. And this is what they wanted the students to do as practitioners so that they would be prepared ultimately to go to university and become these things. Finally, you can't assess what you haven't defined. This was a statement I made to the national educational system of a famous country who wanted me to teach them how to do outcome-based assessment. Okay, and that was my whole presentation, 1 slide. You can't assess what you haven't defined. Until you have outcomes, I can't tell you what to assess or how to assess it. Now, this is just a review. Our working definition now, moving forward, okay, is based on the concept outcomes of significance. It's the hierarchy of forms. The life performance wheel gives us more purchase on it. The life performance outcomes that we just saw, the essential performance components, the St. Paul frameworks, all of those combined, okay, to confront our assessment and grading system. Now, remember our friend credit-based obsession way back there when we talked about CBOs. Our credit-based obsession system is, in the main, a contrived numbers game. It's based on points and it's based on time. Okay, this is shocking. I do a whole long workshop on this to get into the depth of this and how to make all of this work. We pretend that everything is worth 100 points. Nothing is worth 100 points. If something is just what it is, we make up the points. We invent the points. We assign the points. Okay? And those points get assigned to very dissimilar kinds of learning, but the points are the points. And as soon as the points are assigned, the points become the learning. The learning gets lost other than the name of the course and what you, the professor, happen to know goes into the course. When we average those things, we then compound the distortion and we generate a GPA. Okay, so the GPA is combined out of averaging all these points that are about absolutely anything, et cetera, et cetera. That is the antithesis of what we're trying to bring forward with a clarity of focus on outcomes of significance, first principle. Then the distortion worsens. Scoring and grading and assessment and averaging, all of that sort of stuff, all happens. They're not the same thing. They further confuse the issue, except that the same points get applied everywhere. So learning and achievement, the second bullet here, learning, achievement, and performance are disguised. They're distorted and they're lost in averages and permanent records of past mistakes. That leaves no way to recover because the points and the grades, etc., are in ink. So the permanent record means it's too late to improve your learning and get credit for it. Worst of all, that system only gives you this much space to record a student's learning. And so my very favorite slide right here says they must not want to know much. Okay, if everything is supposed to be a number and the number gets put in the little slot, what's the learning? And then you have to take the reputation of the institution, the name of the program, the courses they've taken. You make assumption after assumption after assumption after assumption based on the numbers that go in the little boxes. In that longer workshop that I do, okay, this thing I call the numbers game can't separate essential learning from all the other stuff that gets assessed. Okay, essential learning means it's essential. Now, most assessments, the second bullet, most assessments don't measure essential learning at all. They attempt to assess lots of things, but the lots of things aren't the essential learning. I take people through an exercise in which it proves no item in this test is essential. So there's no essential knowledge in the test because no item is essential. The only essential thing in order to pass is to get enough non-essential items right. Now, the only way you're going to design an assessment, okay, and I'm not recommending numbers at all here, but I want you to understand the concept. Anytime your standard of pass-fail is set below 100, you are saying you can miss any item in this test and still pass. And if you miss any item in the test and still pass, then no item is essential. Right? The only way you're going to have a test of essential knowledge is if the pass is 100. To me, assessment means gathering evidence that is carefully aligned with and directly relates, okay, to a defined performance criterion. And a defined performance criterion is something written in words. It's what you want to see, what needs to be present, what needs to happen. Okay? Then you compare the substance and adequacy of the evidence against the defined criteria. Third, address, i.e. Benjamin Bloom, back to assisting the students, etc., and closing any differences between the two. Now, I have developed a little system that I call the facts, and I would like you to assess the facts. Now, the facts stands for a word or a criterion that starts with the letter F, one that starts with A, one with C, one with T, and one with S. Okay, and I'm about to show you an example. But if we look at the life performance wheel, we'll see that the facts for, or the fact words we might choose for a demonstration, okay, outcome is a demonstration, it's a performance. The F words we choose, or the fact words we choose, will be different for EQ versus IQ in that, or that kind of an outcome, right? It depends on whether the endeavor is a solo endeavor or a group endeavor. So I want you to apply the facts criteria wisely. Now, here are a couple of examples, right? Over on the left were my, I will say that this is typical of most of the academic learning that we do, okay? Where we want a performance, a demonstration to have fluency, accuracy, challenge, thoroughness, and style, okay? And that may have more to do with some kinds of performances than other. You might decide, well, the style is irrelevant here. Okay, fine, drop the S, and you still got fact. And you can say, well, fluency isn't going to really matter here. What matters is accuracy, challenge, and thoroughness, and you've still got act. So 5 criteria that really constitute to me, a full and complete performance we'd want to see. Now, if it's a group performance, if you're having a team do something, all right, then notice the FACT words shift over to the right, where you're going to want the group to show how it can well focus, awareness of the roles to be performed in the activities, clarity of their endeavor, teamwork and cooperation, and mutual support, or other FACT words that pertain. Okay, so there's no, this is not a rigid formula. Whatever words FACTS best apply for you, I'd recommend using them. Now, everybody knows about rubrics these days. I'm going to just show you one thing about rubrics that, again, is going to be controversial. Okay, so I'd like you to focus on the facts, but the way I want to use the rubric is to identify specific strengths and limitations in students' performances. I want to use the rubric to provide tangible feedback to them, and it can even provide a progress chart over time. So here's a hypothetical rubric. Criterion F, what are we seeking ultimately? A high quality demonstration. What does the student need to do? Learn to get there. Now, in the conventional way of scoring a rubric, they would give each of the 5 criteria points, all right? And you get 1 point for the just learning, that is, you're going to make all kinds of mistakes, etc. Okay, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So if you add all of that up, it means that the highest score you can get is a 20, and the lowest score you can get, okay, is a 5. Now, that's the range. So when the typical scoring range is 5 to 20, there are 5 different ways you could get 19. Okay, that's all just simple math. But if we were going to grade the students' performance based on what they did inside that rubric, there are 15 ways to get 18. Now, 18 would give them a high grade. 18 will give them a high grade. But 5 of those ways involves one of the FACTS criteria with an inadequate learning level. Okay? Sorry. They could have a 2 down in one of those. They could have 5 in the other 4, and they would have an 18, which means that an inconsistent, we could call it incomplete, inadequate demonstration would give you an A in one method, okay, if you just counted up the points, and it would give you a keep trying and improve this criterion method if you were criterion based. What you need to support it, okay? These are 5 different kinds of standard systems that are prevalent out there in the world. And it is a criterion-defined substantive system or a self-referenced growth system that's going to actually be aligned with and consistent with this entire approach. That is, you can keep improving. You can keep filling in that matrix, okay? This is how you did the first time, whoop, then the second time, you're up here, and the third time, and the fourth time. So you can use the matrix, okay, or the rubric as a learning guide for the students. Finally, we had to create new kinds of reporting systems because all anybody had was permanent records, okay? Grades and averages, scores and averages, okay? Everything in ink. We created the idea of an open transcript, which meant that you could continue to improve and improve and improve on the skills and abilities and knowledge defined in the course or a program, okay? Having performance portfolios of actual tangible evidence of what the students could do, art projects, other kinds of major projects that they designed or developed, okay? And a model called student-led conferencing where the students actually give a report on their own progress, et cetera, to a review committee or whatever it may be. So I'll conclude. Opportunity ends when you get graded in ink. And when in doubt, grade in pencil. It's all in this book. Okay, this is available on Amazon.com. And here is my contact information, my email, billspady@gmail.com, very simple. Okay, my Skype is William Spady, website, williamspady.com. And 2 or 3 of my books are available on Amazon, different formats. You can get them as ebooks, they'll do print on demand, etc. And Roman and Littlefield Education is the publisher of my other books. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. We have plenty of questions from the audience, as a matter of fact. If you allow me for a question and answer.
Sure.
Can you quit sharing because we're going to continue? Okay. The first question we received it from the audience here. How do we apply the principle of OPE effectively during COVID-19 crisis? How to use OPE hierarchy forms in online education?
I think there's a good news and bad news answer. All right. Over here in the United States, we've been in absolute panic because students hadn't been able to go to school for months, in fact, a whole year. All right. I began to develop, but I didn't follow through with the life performance group, and basically say to parents, they could be teaching kids every one of those performance roles at home because that's what they as parents do. All right, that's one side of it. The side here that is going to be very, very difficult in online learning, and it is why I have always been a critic of online learning, is that it limits the kinds of expressive performances that people can actually do. It tends to be content focused, et cetera, rather than encouraging and making more easy actual demonstrations. So that's the challenge. I don't know how you do laboratory work. I don't know how you do many of the things a university requires for professional training and development, okay? Simply doing online information, okay? I don't want the pilot of my airplane having to learn how to fly the airplane online, et cetera. So there are serious limitations with COVID, and COVID really brings out both the best and the worst in us, but it makes these distinctions very clear.
Thank you. We have another question here from Dr. Muhammad Shoaib asking, IAA, which is the national accreditation, which is the local national accreditation, has recently introduced a value domain replacing competency domain as one of the program learning outcome. We will be thankful to Prof. William if he enlightened us about the value domain in our program, and courses.
Okay. There's two things about values. You can teach about values and what values are, or you can have people embody those values in the actual things that they engage in the world. Okay. So I don't know what values curriculum or what values expectations that the AAA, I think it's AAAS, isn't it? Yes.
The IAA.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but here's where we go back. Okay. That framework that I showed. Okay. Self-directed learner. Okay, collaborative worker, etc. That framework of performance roles and qualitative attributes. Okay, you could build in, okay, those kinds of value attributes into a framework of that kind if that's what you wanted from your students. You could then create essential performance components where the students would actually, in activities, in projects, in engagements, have to exemplify and practice some of those, quote, values. So without knowing them in detail, I would say that's the vehicle that allowed us to really bring the qualitative aspects of learning and the qualitative aspects of who is the human being, to bring those things directly into the picture.
Okay, thank you. There is another question from one of the audience here. He mentioned what would be the ideal method to measure the learning outcome achieved by a student during summative assessment?
The answer is I have no idea, because it depends on what the summative assessment is. All
okay.
Right? The idea, see, Dr. Al-Kawadi, our notion of this is that these things we call the culminating outcome, we gave them exit outcome. Okay, when you want students to either exit your course or exit your program or exit your university, what is that you ultimately want them to demonstrate? Okay, that's the challenging thing. Okay, so you have clarity of focus on that if you can really define those words. And that's what I spent my career trying to help people and universities and schools do that well. Okay, if you can do that well, that should give you a clue about your criteria or your ideal. It's your ideal. Your ideal is what's the best person I can send out the door here? And those words define and shape that.
Thank you. There is a last and final question. Can you share some of the challenges that you come across while implementing outcome-based education and how you overcome it?
Do we have a week or two to discuss that?
No, we have 1 minute left. Then we're gonna have final thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's a longer question. This is why I kept it at the end, Bill.
Yes. Well, that
just in a brief, please.
That question is the answer to that question has to do with every one of the 4 principles. There are clarity of focus challenges. There are expanded opportunity challenges. That is going to disrupt everything because people are not used to that. The high expectations only give high grades for good work, not low grades for poor work. Okay, I mean, all of those, and design down itself, the 4 principles give you, okay, the 4 major areas of challenge. And that's the work we do with people, is help them work that out in their organizations once they're doing it.
Sure. Well, for summary, for this really wonderful presentation from Professor William Spady, today we have outcome-based education, OPE, a philosophy and a strategy committed and operated to maximize the philosophy and strategy committed and operated to maximize the success of all the learners. Outcomes are defined by words, not numbers. Again, OPE model has a clear criterion, defined standard for every achievement level. Performance standards are set by field experts. Multiple performance trials are allowed. Two purposes of OPE: learners should be fully equipped and empowered at graduation, maximize the condition of success. 3 premises of OPE's philosophy: all the students can learn and succeed. Success breeds success. Universities control the condition of success. 4 power principles of OPE are the critical determinants of the condition of success. 4 power principles has been mentioned of OPE. OPE is powerful when you apply the 4 principles consistently. Essential performance component determine the curriculum, instructional process, essential elements, learning future. Assessment means gathering evidences that's carefully aligned with and directly related. Performance assessment facts appropriate to IQ or AQ. Style rubrics are familiar and can identify specific strengths and limitations in a student performance. OPE created a new record-keeping and reporting system. This I try to summarize as much as I can from long, one of the best lectures we heard from you, Bill. Before we conclude, we have 1 minute for final thoughts, please.
Yes, let's go. Well, let's go back to that previous slide. I thought about this quite a bit.
No, it's
Final-
there. It's in front of you now.
I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
My final thoughts is performance learning is three-dimensional. Okay. It's content, it's competence, and it's context. Okay. Number two, you can average numbers, but you can't average outcomes.
Yes,
You can't average outcomes. They're words.
indeed.
And I will go with the theme of our fourth section. You can't assess what you haven't defined. Okay, you've got to know what you're looking for, the substance of what you're looking for, and the criteria you seek in order to do a real assessment. Those are sort of my three takeaways for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, next slide, please. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. What I'd like to share, what I would like to share is that my colleagues and I are putting on a virtual global summit in June on outcome-based education and all aspects of it. Okay, how you get a system ready, how you design the curriculum, restructuring courses, etc. I mean, it's going to be an enormously rich program, 50 different kinds of presentations from a whole team of experts of people I've gathered around the world. And there's full information on a website. We've created an organization called the International Network for Outcome-Based Education, and IN4OBE for short. And if you just put that into a web search, it'll come up and look at that website. It lays out everything about that program. And I truly hope that you'll take advantage of it and join us.
Well
I want
done.
to thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Al-Khalidi. Thank you very much. It's been a delight to meet you and have you as a colleague, and all the support that you and your staff have given me. And I hope we can do this again. And I'm happy to work with organizations
Sure we will.
that want to go further down this path.
Sure, we will. Many thanks, Professor William Spady. On behalf of the IU faculty, staffs, leaders, really would like to thank you, Professor, to accept our invitation to attend with this webinar series, Chat and Talk. We are pro-education. We are enhancing education all over. Thank you for all the people attendance from all over the world. We have people register from all over the world today. Thank you for those people they have morning, some of them they have evening, some of you have afternoon like us. And we're sorry, William, Bill, we wake you up in the morning early today. You have, I think, 5 o'clock there.
I got up at 4 in the morning.
Okay, and I will see you all hopefully with God grace in our next webinar on May 24, 2021, with a new speaker, with a new panelist. Thank you all, and wishing good luck. And thank you again, Professor William Spady, for everything. Thank you.